Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing on and finishing up Reach Up for the Sunrise by UselessProtagonist, and this video is going to be chapters 9 and 10. Hinata seems to relax after driving for a bit. Tsukishima remained quiet as to not disturb him, though admittedly he would have been silent anyway given Hinata was the initiator of most of their conversation. But he also finds staring out the window relaxing, watching landscapes go by and the congested urban area starting to fade into more open country. Then Hinata does talk and he asks Tsukishima, "Are you hungry?" At first Tsukishima shrugs, but then remembers Hinata probably can't see, and then he says, "A bit." "We'll stop by somewhere, yeah?" And Tsukishima hums an agreement. Hinata soon pulls into the drive-thru of a nearby fast food place. "I guess you can find it anywhere," Tsukishima thinks as they order. He asks for the same thing Hinata orders and lets the other pay when Hinata rejects his offer to put money towards his own order. Even though they go through the drive-thru, Hinata still ends up parking, quite crookedly, but Tsukishima decides not to tease him about it, in the parking lot so they can eat. Tsukishima's not complaining, but it probably would have been more comfortable to eat at a table than with his knees pressed up against the glove compartment. But he was glad to have something to occupy himself with than the need to start a conversation. Thankfully, Hinata took care of that. "My mom and Natsu will probably be asleep when we get there," Hinata told him as he scarfed down his fries. "So you don't have to be nervous or anything." Tsukishima didn't know if Hinata was insanely good at reading him or remembering how much he detested interaction with those he was unused to. He was still appreciative and nodded. Hinata smiled. "My mom is pretty cool. She won't badger you with questions or anything. Natsu, on the other hand, well, she loves pestering people." "So she's like you," Tsukishima said with an easy smile. Hinata chuckled and rubbed at the back of his neck a bit sheepishly. "Yeah." "Don't worry, I'll go easy on her." "Thanks." There was a small pause between them as they continued to eat, Hinata dipping his fries in ketchup and Tsukishima taking a sip from his drink. "She'll probably ask you a lot of things, especially if you like being outside or want to go camping, but I'll tell her—" "You were gonna go camping?" Tsukishima interrupts and Hinata stops. "Sorry," the blonde says as he realized what he'd done. "It's okay," his companion shrugging off the apology. "And yeah, we kind of have this tradition. It's not really camping, but we take this truck out in the fields near our house and stargaze. The camping was when we would set up a tent in the backyard to fall asleep. Calling it camping is just easier." Tsukishima noted the warm look on his face. He also noted the horrible things it did to his insides. "I told her when I finally brought it back we'd go," Hinata continued. "But it's okay. I won't be away forever." "You can still go." But that's rude. I can't just leave you with my mom or ask you to leave without me. I meant I could go with you," he interjected, slightly exasperated, though he knew he hadn't exactly clarified his meaning until now. But Hinata seemed surprised, his eyes wide. You would? You want to?" he asked hopefully. His sudden enthusiasm made Tsukishima somewhat self-conscious, almost like he was being put out on the spot now with his answer, though it should have been quite obvious. He shrugged. "Sure, I don't see why not." A wide grin broke out over Hinata's features. "Awesome! Natsu will be so happy," he said. "And me too, of course." Unfortunately, Tsukishima had been taking another sip of his drink during Hinata's words, and despite what Tsukishima wanted to believe about himself, the following coughing fit he then tried to hide was almost likely caused by it. After assuring Hinata that he was fine, they soon finished up their food and Tsukishima got out to stretch his legs when gathering their trash and dumping it in the nearby waste bin. When he hopped back in, Hinata started the car and yawned. "Tired?" he asked, though he was sure he already knew the answer from the way his companion's eyelids drooped. "Yeah," he said, softly, like a sigh. He pulled out of the parking lot and they were back on the road again. "I think I'll fall asleep when we get there. I hope you don't mind," he said sheepishly. "Sounds good. I probably will too," Tsukishima said. He gathered his bag in his lap closer against his chest to rest on his chin. Although he might not have been as sleepy looking as Hinata was, he could feel the slight ache of tiredness behind his eyes. Tsukishima must have dozed off, as it felt like he'd only blinked before Hinata was turning the engine off. He jolted his head up, neck aching a bit from the way his head was turned. Hinata was looking out the window of the truck. "Yeah, it's quiet. They're probably asleep," he said. Hinata then opened the door to hop out, and Tsukishima followed suit. The blonde shrugged his bag over his shoulder while Hinata went near the back of the truck and picked up his duffel bag, leaving the bike, and Tsukishima then followed him as he made his way towards the front of the house. "Just follow me," Hinata said as he got them through the front entrance. It was dark. The space was already foreign to Tsukishima, but appeared even more so in the dark as he stumbled between various objects, trying to keep his focus on Hinata's vague silhouette. It feels like a rush as they make their way through the house until Hinata stops and Tsukishima nearly knocks into him while he's also stopping as well. Hinata then opened the door to what Tsukishima assumed was his room, and after the redhead fumbled with the light switch, his assumption was confirmed. Tsukishima squinted into the bright room and followed Hinata as he headed inside. "Oh, she already put the futons out. Cool." Hinata spoke quietly, a harsh whisper. He dropped his duffel bag on the floor. Tsukishima surveyed the room. It was rather bare, with only 2 futons in the middle of the room, a small bedside table with a lamp. It wasn't really what he expected. Hinata seemed to be reading his thoughts when he interjected. "Most of my things are back at my other place. I took almost everything when I left, except for these." Hinata made his way over to where a window was parallel to the door. Tsukishima watched as Hinata's fingers latched onto something suspended from a curtain rod by a small wire. The other fiddled with it for a moment before a string of bright lights lit up over the rod. They were fairy lights. "Natsu put them in here for me," Hinata laughed. He then looked over at Tsukishima, still holding his bag, and still practically in the doorway. "You can put your stuff anywhere you like," he said, making the gesture with his hands. Tsukishima then followed suit. It felt almost like another reality as he placed his bag down beside the futon nearest him. Perhaps it was just the tiredness behind his eyes or his own overthinking at the lack of response to the person he was pretty sure he had a crush on. Wasn't this what teenage girls practically daydreamed over? It was stupid of Tsukishima to think that way. He wasn't a teenage girl. And he wasn't someone to let a simple crush make him act like a complete idiot. Tsukishima," Hinata said, sounding unsure. "I'm gonna get changed. I can go in the bathroom if—" Unfortunately, the world was trying very hard to prove him wrong. "You're fine," Tsukishima said, albeit roughly, but he hoped the other might contribute that to sleepiness. The next few minutes were silent as Hinata was changing, and Tsukishima figured he should as well. He did it rather fast and pretended to fumble around in his bag while he heard Hinata pull back the covers of his futon. Tsukishima then got up and turned off the light and made his way back to the other futon, placing his glasses by the pillow. He couldn't lie. Even though he was still a bit hyper-aware of the space he was taking up, it felt good to lay down. "Good night," Hinata said. "Good night," Tsukishima replied back. He shifted on his futon so that he was on his side facing the door. Tsukishima closed his eyes, attempting to fall asleep, though the foreign surroundings and Hinata also by his side was a bit of a distraction from his wandering thoughts. Then suddenly he heard Hinata chuckling. At first he was unsure if he heard right or if this was his half-sleep brain imagining it, but a few seconds later he heard it again. "What is it?" Despite being in separate futons, Tsukishima felt Hinata shift next to him. He wondered if he should turn around, but instead laid there and listened as Hinata said, "Well," he interrupted himself with another breathless chuckle, "I don't think I can fall asleep." Tsukishima was silent for a beat. He didn't really know if Hinata meant something different since he obviously had shown signs of exhaustion on the way here. "How come?" Tsukishima asked into the dark. There was another shift in movement on Hinata's side. I'm not used to sleeping with anyone," the other said, and Tsukishima couldn't help the stiffness that seemed to reflexively take a hold of him. Hinata then continued, I used to be with Natsu, but I haven't in a while, or maybe it's just you. Tsukishima could only stare into the darkness, his thoughts going 1,000,000 miles per hour, yet also at a snail's pace. Do you want me to move somewhere else? Was the only thought the blonde could think to say, while trying to piece together the other more fleeting thoughts. No, Hinata whispered, amusement still evident in his tone. I like having you here too much. At this point, Tsukishima was beyond sleep. His body felt hyper-aware yet still lethargic from exhaustion, and he kept playing Hinata's words back in his mind. I like having you here too much. I like having you here too much. I like having you here too much. And all Tsukishima could think was this was his chance. He already promised himself to address his feelings when the moment arose, or at least an opportunity presented itself. However, he wasn't expecting it to be so soon, or so late, or in that moment Hinata would seem dangerously close to confessing something similar himself. Hinata? Tsukishima started as he moved himself to turn over, but the words died on his tongue when he realized Hinata had turned himself over, bringing their faces much closer together than Tsukishima had originally planned for. Hinata also seemed to be taken aback as well, if the hitch in his breath was anything to go by. The tension built between them was palpable. Tsukishima couldn't even tell if he was breathing. But Hinata was the first to break the silence, as he blinked and seemed to breathe out a shaky, "Sorry," he said, though the sound was barely above a whisper, and Tsukishima was not sure he would have heard it if they were not so close. I think I'm just too tired." In most of these situations, Tsukishima would use his words. That's what he was usually good at, using words and logical reasoning. However, perhaps it was the thought of losing what could potentially be his only chance to express his feelings, or the tension in the air at the close proximity, or the fact that Hinata had left the fairy lights on and the glow they cast seemed almost ethereal. Or maybe it was Tsukishima's own exhaustion drugging his brain, but whatever the reason was, seemed irrelevant as Tsukishima leaned in towards Hinata. Tsukishima may never have been a man of action, but in this moment he feels he can be. Chapter 10. Together. Tsukishima knows his angle is off. He's leaning too far forward, and the position is less than ideal, not to mention his glasses have long been abandoned, leading to lack of proper sight in the dim lighting didn't help against. Therefore, the kiss is more pressed against the corner of Hinata's mouth than properly lined up. It lasts a moment before Tsukishima draws back and takes a breath as Hinata's eyes flutter open to blink owlishly at him. It's in that moment that cold fear and anxiety grips Tsukishima. He's unsure how he could go back to sleep here next to Hinata, and his brain runs through scenarios of leaving in the morning and how he would get back home alone. How would he tell Yamaguchi? What would he tell his brother? I'm sorry. But he stopped when Hinata sighs, the other's body seeming to relax with relief. And despite the blurriness without his glasses, Tsukishima can make out the flash of teeth of a grin on the other's face. I've been waiting forever for you to do that, Hinata said, the emphasis on forever and sounding faintly exasperated. Tsukishima found himself at a loss, again, processing Hinata's words at a much slower pace than he should have been. Hinata was smiling at him and staring in the way that makes Tsukishima feel completely vulnerable. What? Hinata just chuckles and leans in, brushing against Tsukishima's bottom lip. I like you. He pauses and then breathes, Tsuki. It's not much. Not that it's bad. In fact, Tsukishima would have to say it might have been one of the best moments of his life. It's just too much. Hinata is too much. For the second time, Tsukishima leans in, and this time Hinata is reaching for him. There are hands at his shoulders, and he feels the other curving underneath him as he leans over to try to achieve a better angle. Their noses squish, and Tsukishima can feel the arm he has by Hinata's side to balance himself is starting to cramp, and perhaps Hinata is kissing him with a bit too much force, but Tsukishima can't really find the energy to care. They get better with practice. The realization lingers idly in the back of Tsukishima's mind. He's never kissed anyone before now. He's not sure about Hinata. There's a sort of clumsiness to the other's movements that makes him suspect the redhead hasn't, but that really doesn't mean anything. The clumsiness could just be eagerness, lack of experience, or lack of skill. But Tsukishima could not care less because Hinata is warm in his arms and soft at his mouth. They've since shifted positions from their first couple of kisses. Tsukishima's back is against his futon, and Hinata is not so much on top of him as he is simply leaning over him, chest to chest, one of his knees pressing against Tsukishima's thigh. Hinata's hand cups his face, and Tsukishima presses a hand near Hinata's lower back and the other against the back of Hinata's head. At this, Hinata makes a soft sound against his mouth, and it's honestly the most incredible thing. Tsukishima doesn't know how long it is before they part to catch their breath, foreheads pressed together, and Hinata's hand still against his face. But Tsukishima doesn't wait too long before giving another soft peck to Hinata's lips, then another, and then another on Hinata's nose, chin, cheeks, and forehead until Hinata starts chuckling and Tsukishima's mind is clearing through the haze and his heart is soaring. How long? Tsukishima finds himself asking. For a moment, Hinata just stares at him, still gooey-eyed, and Tsukishima can't help but find it adorable. But after a moment, the redhead blinks to himself. A while? He admits almost sheepishly, even though they had been making out a few seconds ago. Tsukishima feels his stomach twist, in slight apprehension and also excitement. How long is a while? Hinata chews at his bottom lip, and Tsukishima watches the movement before Hinata says, A few months? Tsukishima grins slyly. Are you telling me or asking me? Hinata whines at the other's teasing, but there's a wide smile that Tsukishima has the strongest urge to kiss away. A moment later, I have to tell you something, Hinata says when they break apart for a moment. Tsukishima hums questioningly against the other's cheek. You know, the other day when I was asking about a book? Mm-hmm. Well, I actually lied. I didn't have a project, Hinata said softly, like a secret. I wanted to talk to you. It takes Tsukishima a second, but then he feels a laugh bubbling up in his chest and grins wildly against Hinata's hair. You're such a dork. And Hinata giggles, seemingly relieved. I have something I should tell you too, then, Tsukishima says. Huh? What? Hinata questioned. Remember when you asked me, not long after you first came into the shop, if I remembered you the first time we met? I actually lied. I didn't remember you until you showed up in front of me in Yamaguchi. Hinata seems to almost hiccup with laughter. Their foreheads bump, and it's the last straw before Tsukishima lets his own laughter bubble over, and then they're both in giggling disarray. We're such a mess, Tsuki, Hinata says. The nickname takes on a whole different meaning in the way he says it. Tsukishima breathes in deeply. His fingers at the back of Hinata's head urge him closer, and then they're back to kissing. The kisses soon become less hurried, not lessening in enthusiasm as much as the franticness from before has now faded to comfort. Eventually they do stop, but it feels less like the end of something and more like a transition of sorts. Hinata barely moves from his position, so Tsukishima ends up falling asleep on his back. It's fine, he thinks, his fingers brushing through Hinata's hair. There's so much his brain wants to sift through, but it's too late in the night and he is far too content. When Tsukishima wakes up, he's almost unbearably hot. He's only half awake, knows it's probably too early in the morning to be up, and feeling stifled is most likely what woke him up. When this situation happens at home, it's merely a case of him kicking the covers off of his legs to allow the bedroom air to cool him off, and so, by reflex, that's exactly what he does. There's a small groan as his foot makes contact with something solid in trying to push the covers off of himself, and it's not from him. Hinata's messy hair comes into Tsukishima's blurry vision, and the other realizes what has happened. He scrubs his eyes with the heel of his palms, blinking out the sleep and trying to see clearly as he's unable to without his glasses. Sorry, he mutters. There's a low hum from Hinata, who wiggles himself out from underneath his own covers so that they gather in a pile against his back, and he curls up more against Tsukishima's side. Tsukishima moves too. His back aches from the angle he fell asleep on it and the foreignness of the hard futon rather than his own bed, so he turns to the side, facing Hinata. Hinata's eyes are still closed as he says, "I don't think I can go back to sleep." Tsukishima hums in agreement. "What time is it?" he asks. Hinata snuggles closer till his hair brushes under Tsukishima's chin. "Don't know," he answers, and Tsukishima's not surprised. The blonde shifts over on his futon. Without his glasses, he pats around before he finds them, as well as his phone. He puts them on and checks the time on his phone, 7:38 a.m. There's also an unread message notification, but he ignores it for now. "It's still pretty early," he says when he turns back around. Hinata still has his eyes closed, hair flattened from sleep, but he makes a small noise of acknowledgement. "Do you think anyone else is up?" Don't know," Hinata mumbles, blinking open his eyes. "I'm not sure when Mom has to go to work." Tsukishima lays still, his thoughts wandering. On some level, there's a knot of anxiety within him, being in a place he's unfamiliar with, about to interact with individuals he's unsure of the response they'll have to him. This is even more so than before, considering what it is that has developed between him and Hinata last night. But the other, more rational part of his brain knew he was just being stupid. And everything last night comes back to Tsukishima with startling clarity, sharp and clear like the morning sunlight peeking through the window. It feels embarrassing in hindsight, but not because he regrets it. He stands by his actions. He looks down and Hinata is blinking up at him, long eyelashes and bright brown eyes, with barely visible smudges underneath. Tsukishima ruffles his hair affectionately. "I'm getting up," he says. Hinata makes no argument with him. They disentangle from each other quickly and dig through their bags respectively. Tsukishima pulls on a pair of sweats he brought while Hinata leaves the room for a moment with his toothbrush, not bothering to put anything else on other than the t-shirt and boxers he fell asleep in. Tsukishima then sits on the futon and goes to check his messages. It's from his brother, simply wishing him a good night and hopes that he was having a good time at Yamaguchi's. Right. Hinata comes back in right when Tsukishima finishes typing a quick reply and throwing his phone on the bed. "So my mom is up right now," Hinata informs him, "and she wants to meet you before she has to leave, and Natsu really wants to meet you too." Tsukishima swallows. "Okay," he says slowly. "Did you tell your mom about, He gestures between them. "Us." Hinata's eyes go noticeably wide and his cheeks color. No, I mean, not that I don't want to, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to be. During his ramble, Tsukishima has gotten up and eventually put a hand over the other's mouth, successfully silencing him, lest he explodes. Hinata looks up at him as he pulls his hand away and tries to give a soft, reassuring smile. "It's okay. We don't have to say anything, and we don't have to label whatever it is we have, but I want to know what you want because..." Tsukishima pauses, which is ridiculous because it's not like it's a secret at this point. "Because I like you, Hinata." Hinata's breath hitches before a wobbly smile spreads across his flushed face. "I like you too. Can I kiss you?" Tsukishima can feel his ears burning, but says, "Yeah," before leaning in. Hinata's breath is warm. He tastes slightly of toothpaste. His hands curl in Tsukishima's shirt. These observations swirl in Tsukishima's mind. Everything much more clear than it was the night before, and he wants to remember this. It's hard to believe this is his life now. When they pull away after a moment, Hinata bites his lip a bit before saying, "I feel okay about telling my mom, if it's all right with you." It makes Tsukishima feel more that he's painting a target on his back for teasing being a complete stranger who was going to be first introduced as a friend and now boyfriend under a 24-hour period, but he trusts Hinata, so seeing how he knows his mother better than Tsukishima probably ever would. "Okay," he agrees. Hinata's mom might be the nicest person Tsukishima's ever met. Hinata shares his mother's eyes and bright smile, but other than that, he probably would never have known they were related unless he was told. Tsukishima is unsure if Hinata has told her of their relationship, but he barely thinks about it when she shakes his hand and expresses how nice it is to finally meet him after all her son has mentioned about him. She also expresses how impressed she is that he's gotten Hinata to pick up a book willingly, and after she apologizes for having to leave on such short notice. It leaves Tsukishima somewhat dazed and a little anticlimactic with all the nervousness that had been sitting in the back of his mind. However, this is quickly overridden by another pair of brown eyes watching him curiously. Unlike Hinata's mother, there is no doubt that Natsu and Hinata are related. They have the same messy red hair, brown eyes, and seemingly the same copious amounts of energy if their sibling greeting is anything to go by, though Tsukishima can't say he doesn't find it adorable. Hinata had introduced them shortly afterward. Tsukishima admits that he doesn't really know how to act when around others who are younger than he is, having not had much experience, but Natsu looks up at him and continues to tilt her head until pretending to almost fall back before she and Hinata both erupts into bouts of laughter. Hinata then heads to the kitchen to make some breakfast, though Tsukishima objects, as he's fine with the cereal that Natsu is currently eating. But the other dismisses him, so he sits across the table from him, eyes fixed on him as she eats her cereal, rather than the small TV across the room tuned to cartoons. Tsukishima can feel the interrogation coming at any moment. "How tall are you?" he's then asked. "There it is," he thinks. "I'm 192 centimeters, he answers. And the questions come rapid fire. "How old are you? Do you like music? What kind of music? Do you go to school with Oni-chan? Do you play volleyball with him too?" "Natsu!" Hinata calls, amusement in his voice. "At least give him a chance to answer." Natsu ceases her stream of questions, puffs out her cheeks in a pout, and goes back to finishing the rest of her cereal. 20s. Yes. No preference. No. And no. Tsukishima answers, and Natsu grins. "Do you have any questions for me?" she asks as she cradles her cereal bowl before tipping it back to drink the milk. He thinks. If there's one thing he knows he's not good at, it's thinking of questions. He just naturally isn't a curious person. He decidedly settles on something lame. "What's your favorite color?" "Pink," Natsu says without missing a beat. "And also I like soft yellows." Tsukishima nods unhelpful. Thankfully, it's in that moment that Hinata announces breakfast. After informing Natsu that they were planning a small camping excursion, the next few days were filled with bustling and busyness. Keeping Natsu entertained was the biggest part of it. Tsukishima found she was very talkative. Tsukishima didn't mind, however. He was more than happy to let her tell him about school, her friends, and her interests, as well as stories about Hinata that he greatly appreciated, that relieved his monotony as he did the dishes or swept the floor. Hinata's mom had told him he didn't have to, but he'd offered. Hinata and Natsu had also planned a list of things they would need for the small trip, which led to a very long venture to find the location of a gas lamp. Tsukishima didn't really do much himself. He helped out where he could. He watched TV with Hinata, and Natsu watched her when she wanted to prove how much better at tossing she had become than her brother. Despite this, the days passed rather quickly. It's also amazing to Tsukishima how he's technically been dating for only a few days, and now how distracting it is to have the other near. Or perhaps it was always been true, but until now he's never really let himself fully embrace it. And he's found himself gazing in Hinata's direction more often than not. They also haven't kissed again either since that first day of their visit. It's not something that entirely bothers Tsukishima, even if he wasn't respecting Hinata's timing in when he wanted to tell his mother. Tsukishima would prefer not to have an audience witness to certain interactions. Although that didn't stop Tsukishima from kissing the back of Hinata's neck one night while they were brushing their teeth in the bathroom. He'd do it again just to see the same adorable reaction. "Psst, Tsukishima, are you asleep?" Hinata whispered. Although Tsukishima had his eyes closed, he immediately opened them and turned his head over to see Hinata sitting up in the dim light. "Not anymore," he answered then. I'm kidding, when he noticed Hinata's apologetic face. Hinata then made a motion for him to follow, and they slip out of bed to the truck, trying not to disturb the tightly curled up Natsu. It was hard to believe after she had practically been vibrating with excitement all day. Hinata managed to scoot Natsu over more towards the wall of the truck, and then zipped up the front of the tent back. It has surprised Tsukishima that even with such a small tent, it could still fit and be set up in the back. However, it wasn't the most comfortable to lie on, but that wasn't very surprising. For a second, Tsukishima feared they might go sit in the car. He still had his knees a bit sore from the ride earlier today. It had been short and also even more uncomfortable than the ride he'd had with just him and Hinata. Natsu sat in the middle, so not only was there no room for Tsukishima's knees, but his shoulder was also pressed rather hard against the passenger side door. But instead, Hinata came toward him and wrapped his arms around him in a hug. Tsukishima smiles softly and rests his arms over Hinata's shoulders and returns the hug. As soon as they sit down on the grass, much the same as they had only a few hours ago, but this time with Hinata more closely beside him, resting his cheek against the blonde's shoulder, with his fingers drifting through Hinata's hair. It feels much more intimate at this moment, much more soft and warm despite the cool air. The stars are so beautiful, as Hinata and Natsu have both mentioned during that night. Tsukishima kisses Hinata under the stars on the last night of their stay. There's not so much to pack, of course, so it's barely an hour after breakfast that he and Hinata are ready to leave. Hinata lingers with his mother in the kitchen while Natsu follows Tsukishima as she heads outside to the truck with his bag. It's a little heartwarming how close she lingers, though he doesn't seem to realize it. "Take care of Oni-chan," she says, in a much more serious tone than anyone in their pajamas with bedhead has the right to. "I will," he assures her. "You take care of your mom." "I always do." She's still a little serious, and Tsukishima can't help but chuckle a little. Hinata then comes out of the house, laughing with his mom. He gives her a tight hug and a quick peck on the cheek before calling out to Natsu. She runs, and there's another tight hug being given. Tsukishima is so caught up in watching that he almost misses Hinata's mom beckoning to him. He walks over to where she too gives him a hug. Tsukishima hesitates mainly due to their drastically differing heights, but even as she pulls away from their embrace, her hand lingers on a hold on his forearm, and she smiles up at him. "Shouyou is very lucky to have you. I hope you feel you can stay for a while." She knows. Hinata told her, and now she knows. And by the look on her face, as he blushes, she knows that he knows that she knows. But despite this, he still manages a calm and reassuring, "I plan to." "Good," she says, and lets him go with a slight pat on his arm. Tsukishima also receives another quick hug from Natsu and promises for the umpteenth time to visit again soon before climbing into the cramped truck with Hinata. Hinata is grinning as they drive away. "I didn't expect you to be so happy to leave," Tsukishima comments. Hinata turns his bright brown eyes on him for a quick moment. "I'll miss them, but I'm still happy you're here." He's blushing when he says it, and Tsukishima thinks he might not ever want the other to not be flustered around him, though it also makes his own ears burn in return. "Thanks. I think your mom is too," he teases. Hinata's face goes really red. His hands tighten on the steering wheel. "What? What did she say? Something embarrassing?" Tsukishima can't help it, but he laughs, sudden and loud. "No, not really. My brother has said much worse to me." Hinata seems to relax at that. "Would you like to meet him?" Tsukishima asks then. "It's only fair after I've met some of your family." He's been thinking about it for a while. Ever since he decided that staying at Hinata's house wasn't the most stressful thing he'd ever endured. Also, he still felt a bit guilty about lying to his brother. "I'd love that," Hinata says with his usual cheerful enthusiasm. "I'd also like to tell my friends, too. Not Kageyama if you don't want, but at least Kenma." "That's fine. Tell anyone you want," Tsukishima says. Although he is feeling good at this moment, he has a feeling those words might come back to haunt him. However, it doesn't matter now. Maybe we can even go on some real dates too now. I'd like that, Hinata admits, voice sounding soft and thoughtful in the best way. I like you a lot too, Tsuki. I'm glad we're together. Me too, Hinata, Tsukishima says back, voice carried on golden sunlight of the morning. I like you a lot too. Alright, friends, I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope that you liked this first Tsukihina fic on the channel. I love this one. I love Tsukihina in general, but I love like aged up fics of the two of them, and I just think they're so freaking cute. I can't help it. I definitely don't read as much Tsukihina as I do Kiribaku, but I really do love it. There's at least one or two more that'll be on the channel, and we'll see if I can find some more that I really like and would like to do on the channel. All right, I am so glad that we got to do this one together. As of right now, I am not sure what will be coming next on the channel. I think it will be whatever you guys voted for, so it potentially will either be a Hunger Games fic, another Tsukihina, but I'm expecting that it's probably going to be another Kiribaku. And if it's the one that I already have recorded and planned, it will be Explosive Notes, which you guys have been begging for on AO3. So if we do get to do that one next, I know you guys will love it. It's another punk rock band fic, and I have written this one, and I know, like me, a lot of you other guys love punk rock Baku Squad, and all right. We've rambled enough at the end of this one. I'm so glad that you guys came to join me. And if you guys come back for another video, I'll see you next time.